Welcome to a journey into the heart of darkness. Tonight we venture into the unforgiving embrace of the unknown, where the familiar rustle of leaves can mask unspeakable horrors. We delve into 4 true horror stories of those who were abandoned or lost in the woods, their desperate cries for help swallowed by the dense, indifferent trees. Prepare yourself for a chilling experience that will haunt you long after the video ends. Are you brave enough to face the darkness? The air grew heavy as Mark ventured deeper into the woods. He'd been hiking for hours, the trail long vanished beneath a carpet of emerald moss. The sunlight dwindled to an eerie, filtered glow through the dense canopy. A shiver ran down Mark's spine, a primal instinct warning him of unseen eyes. The forest had grown quiet, eerily so. Panic began to gnaw at the edges of his composure. He pulled out his phone, the screen a mocking reflection of his own fear as the signal icon remained stubbornly empty. Night was falling, the shadows lengthening into menacing shapes. He stumbled forward, desperate to find his way back to the trail. Then he saw it. A shape in the distance, barely discernible against the darkening trees. It was tall and slender, almost skeletal, and seemed to sway slightly, as if beckoning him closer. Terror, raw and consuming, seized him. He turned, his heart pounding against his ribs. He ran, crashing through the undergrowth, the sound of his own ragged breathing echoing in his ears, but the forest held him captive. Thorns tore at his clothes, branches lashed out like angry whips, but still he ran. He caught another glimpse of the figure, closer now. The last thing he saw before the darkness consumed him was the figure gliding towards him, its skeletal fingers outstretched. Mark knew then, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he wouldn't escape this forest. Laughter echoed through the trees, the carefree sound of youthful abandon. The group of friends, giddy with the thrill of a day spent exploring the woods, had decided on one last prank before heading home. They chose Emily, the shy one, the one who always seemed a little on edge. It was all in good fun, they reassured themselves, just a harmless prank. They'd hide, let her sweat it out for a few minutes, then jump out and yell, "Surprise! Easy!" They pushed her playfully towards a towering oak, its branches heavy with moss, and told her to count to 100. They'd be right back, they promised, their words already fading as they melted into the undergrowth. Emily leaned against the cool bark, her eyes closed as she dutifully started counting. She could still hear their muffled laughter receding into the distance, and a smile touched her lips. But as the numbers climbed higher, so did a knot of unease in her stomach. The laughter had faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. "Guys!" she called out, her voice a hesitant tremor in the still air. Only the echo of her own voice answered. A wave of dizziness washed over her. They wouldn't leave her here, not really, not in the middle of nowhere. But as the minutes stretched into an eternity, doubt began to gnaw at her composure. She called out again, her voice cracking with panic, but the forest remained silent. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long, ominous shadows. The once familiar woods now seemed menacing, every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig sending shivers down her spine. She thought of the stories, the whispers of things that lurked in the shadows. Tears streamed down her face as she stumbled through the undergrowth, desperate to find her way back. She cried out again, a desperate, soul-wrenching plea for help. A low growl, barely audible above the pounding of her own heart, sent a fresh wave of terror through her. She wasn't alone. Something watched her from the shadows, something cold and calculating, and in that moment she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that something dark and sinister had followed her out of the woods. Rain lashed against the windshield, blurring the world outside into an impressionistic canvas of grays and blacks. John squinted, trying to make out the road ahead. He was lost, hopelessly so. He'd taken a wrong turn somewhere back, lured off the main highway by a detour sign he could have sworn he'd imagined. Now he was swallowed by a maze of narrow winding roads that seemed to twist and turn back on themselves. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard, its green glow a mocking reminder of the passing time. It was well past midnight, and the rain showed no sign of abating. He reached for his phone, his heart sinking as he saw the ominous no service message flashing on the screen. He was truly alone, adrift in a sea of darkness and rain. The GPS, useless without a signal, taunted him with its frozen blue screen. He slammed his hand against the steering wheel in frustration. Just as he was about to turn around, his headlights flickered across a sign half hidden by overgrown weeds. He reversed slowly, his heart pounding in his chest until the sign came into full view. It was old and weathered, the paint peeling, the lettering barely discernible in the dim light. He strained to make out the words, "Welcome to Silent Hollow. Population 0. A shiver ran down his spine. Silent Hollow? He'd never heard of it, and he'd lived in this area his entire life. He glanced at the road ahead, his stomach twisting into a knot. It was narrow and overgrown, barely more than a dirt track swallowed by a wall of trees. He should turn around, he knew that, but something, perhaps a morbid curiosity or a desperate hope for a shortcut, compelled him forward. He took a deep breath and eased the car onto the dirt road. The forest closed in around him, the trees forming a dense canopy overhead. The air grew heavy, thick with the musk of damp earth and decaying leaves. John rolled down his window, hoping to catch a breath of fresh air, but the stench only intensified. The further he drove, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Dawn broke over the campsite, painting the sky in hues of pale pink and orange, but the beauty of the sunrise did little to ease the knot of dread twisting in Daniel's gut. He sat bolt upright, a gasp escaping his lips. Something was wrong. The campsite, usually bustling with the sounds of his friends preparing breakfast, was eerily silent. He called out, his voice hoarse with sleep, but only the echo of his own words answered him. He scrambled out of his tent, his eyes scanning the campsite, searching for any sign of his 5 friends. The remnants of last night's campfire smoldered in the early morning light. Panic welled up inside him, cold and suffocating. Where were they? He checked their tents, his heart pounding with each empty one he unzipped. Their belongings were still there, backpacks, sleeping bags, even their hiking boots. But of his friends there was no sign. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. He searched frantically, his mind racing, trying to make sense of the impossible. Had they gone for an early morning hike? But they wouldn't leave without telling him, would they? Not all of them. He stumbled over something half hidden in the undergrowth. It was Sarah's camera, its lens cracked, the memory card missing. A chill ran down his spine. Something was terribly wrong. He continued his search, his eyes scanning the forest floor, searching for any clue. He found a single hiking boot, discarded carelessly near the edge of the woods. It was Mike's. He recognized the worn leather and the faded red laces. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands, his mind reeling. What had happened here? He followed the tree line, his eyes scanning the dense undergrowth, and then he saw it. A symbol carved into the bark of a towering oak tree. It was a crudely drawn spiral, its lines uneven as if etched in haste. He stared at it, his blood turning to ice in his veins. He'd seen that symbol before. Thank you for joining us on this terrifying journey into the heart of darkness. The woods, once a place of peace and tranquility, have revealed a sinister side, a haunting reminder that not all who wander are lost, and some are taken. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more chilling tales. Venture deeper into the shadows with us if you dare. Until next time, stay safe and beware of the woods. What lurks behind those trees might be closer than you think.
Ha 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 ha!